Hey there folks, Rel here. In the background you'll see some gameplay from PlanetSide 2, but this is the second part of the Armchair Game Design series that we started up not too long ago. This series is more of a vlog style, where I'm just sharing ideas for systems in games that I'd like to one day create. So if that's not your cup of tea, then feel free to shut down this video, or just turn your brain off and enjoy the gameplay. In the last episode, we talked about a game where each player was a mercenary who took on missions and basically waged war on behalf of corporations out of necessity. If you wanted to live for any great length of time, you'd have to be able to afford what basically amount to extra bodies called skins, so that when you die, your thoughts and your soul can be implanted back into your spare body and you can continue on with your day-to-day. Many games tend to treat their world like a playground. The Call of Duty and the Battlefield franchises are pretty good examples of this. You play and you unlock and you level up and you achieve, and it's fun for a while, but that's not the type of game that can sustain itself. That's the reason we're getting a new Battlefield or a new Call of Duty every year or so. PlanetSide 2 has the same sort of problem, but it doesn't have the same solution available. You can't bust out a new expansion pack or story, you can't create an entirely new game that the majority of your player base is just going to move on to. You just have to keep dripping in content and hoping that the boredom of your player base isn't outpacing how quickly you can come up with new toys. Fundamentally, it's broken because there is currently no reason to fight. The lore of PlanetSide 2 has every faction fighting for a cause or a belief, but when it's translated to actual gameplay, that cause means nothing in the scheme of things. You never die, territory is never permanently captured, you aren't converting enemy players over to your faction, and no progress is ever being made toward any broader view. You're just in a constant cycle of playing the game to play the game. And like I said, that's fine for a while. But what if the game grew with you? What if the game had a deeper sense of purpose that gave you a reason to play outside of just having fun killing things? That's what we're going to be talking about during this commentary, creating a game that does two things: keeps you invested on an emotional level and grows with you by giving you permanence, depth, and a reason to commit. When you think about what you, as a player, enjoy about the games you play, what is it? And I'm talking about something beyond the gameplay, because having good gameplay should be a given regardless. So, do you strive for recognition? Do you feel the need to compete with everyone around you? Or do you just want to build and customize things and have something that you can truly call your own? Do you play to escape real life and live in the world that you play in? Or do you just look for a social experience like being a part of a clan, or leading a squad, or just chatting with the people you don't know but share the same interests with? If you incorporate those elements into your game, I think you can come up with something very powerful, and EVE Online nails this in almost every respect. I don't even think that I have to explain it too much, because if you know anything about EVE Online, you probably already understand. You have a sandbox world that's run by the players. The most powerful players and entities are recognized by their corporations. The most wanted players in the galaxy have their avatars show up right on your TV screen when you're at home, and when players go to war with another faction, there are consequences. The things you own, the things you have invested time in creating, can be destroyed forever. Those consequences create real emotion, connection, and involvement. Warframe is another game that has success with many of these elements. With every big patch, another hero, encounter, or villain is thrown permanently into the game. The story changes and it develops. Factions in Warframe actually fight among one another to capture territory on each planet. And in Warframe, your job as a player is to create a balance of power throughout the entire solar system. And it's because of that your job is never done. If you fight for one faction too much, or if you defeat a specific villain, then the other side is going to send someone to hunt you down. Literally, you'll be doing a run-of-the-mill mission, and halfway through it, a special unit will come by and just try to wreck your party, trying to ruin your day. You don't know exactly when it's going to happen, it's not up to you. It's just a response to the things that you were doing in-game, sent out by someone who really doesn't like you at the moment. There's also a pretty deep social system as well. You don't need to be part of a clan to enjoy the game, but it's an option. You can build your own dojo, or what basically amounts to your clan's headquarters, and you can trade with other players, you can wage war with other clans, you can stake out territory that you can then defend, and if no one can overthrow you, then that land is just yours until someone does. You charge the taxes, you gather the resources, and you create the relationships with the players that set foot in your little part of the galaxy. So, looking at the game that I envision, this little experiment in design, I'd like it to stand on three main pillars. story, progression, and permanence. For story, players are involved on many different levels. Some of it's optional, but a lot of it is not. The major corporations are always fighting among one another, and as a player, you will be participating in these struggles. Each corporation has its own ideals, which you may or may not care about, but they also have different aesthetics and technologies that emphasize these traits. So even if you don't care about what they're preaching, you're still buying what they're selling. This bit is very similar to PlanetSide 2 and Warframe and any game with one faction fighting against another. But to expand on that, I want these stories to change as the game develops. I want factions to conquer territory, I want it to affect the economy, and I even want these changes to oftentimes be irrevocable. If one corporation is constantly and successfully stealing schematics from another, you'll notice their technology change or improve. New weapons, new vehicles, new armor and technologies, those all get passed down to the player in some way or another. If one corporation is doing poorly and also isn't getting any support from the player base, then it may get crushed altogether and never be heard from again. Or that smaller company that's kind of down in the dumps may be forced to put its stock on the market and be picked up by a larger player-run agency, which will then pick up where the NPC corporation left off and hopefully be able to garner more support. Those are the mandatory story elements and the most functional bits regarding gameplay. Optionally, players may have a more personal story. They can have a family, they can have a wife or a husband or a child to look after, or maybe they just have a dog. Remember that the player's purpose in this game, the player's real reason for fighting in this war, is to live, it's to survive. And you can't live without money, so it's very reasonable to assume that you are fighting for your family too, if you have one. And if you do opt into having a family, they're on Earth to begin with. They're safe-ish, inside one of the biodomes scattered throughout the planet, but is that really enough? Is it really ideal to be living day to day in a world running on a war economy? Probably not. You probably want to get your family far, far away from Earth, somewhere you both can be happy without having to worry about whether or not today is going to be your last day, or whether those handful of skins you have left will be enough to make it through the entire year. As a player just starting out, you have a small little room on board the agency's base of operations. Very cramped, very basic, and no room to bring your family. Maybe room enough to own a dog or a goldfish or something, but if you get enough money, you can find a better place. Just a little house with a front yard, not on Earth, but safe in the orbit of the space station that you're working out of. So instead of getting emails from your family every few days telling you how they're doing, you can actually interact with them in person every day and at the end of every mission. That's a big change, right? Being able to see your family at the end of every day. Maybe you decide to find a player-run agency that owns a satellite of their own and has plenty of housing, so you can then work from the same place that you live out of. Imagine if your family members had a deep backstory and character design, something that you'd find from a main character in Mass Effect or another single-player RPG. The money that you make living and dying for is the same money that you'll be using to upgrade your weapons, upgrade your armor, and it's the same money that you'll be using to feed your family. But that's the point. Like I said, you don't have to do this, you don't have to have a family, but being able to go the extra distance like that can create a very compelling experience for the players who want a reason to live in the world that they play in, instead of just being a game that you kind of log on to, you screw around for an hour and a half, and then you log off. But that's the story pillar, part of it at least. Progression plays into this a lot as well. Like I said earlier, corporations are the ones that are producing your weapons or producing your armor and vehicles, and things change. Things really change. For an individual, you gain more recognition for your skill in battle. That's your Battle E, which we talked about in the last episode. So if you're super popular, super good at what you do, corporations are going to want to send you free stuff, free weapons and such to try out. Maybe they're going to persuade you to do some missions for them or buy one of their vehicles and then show it off. If you're not so popular, then that's something that you can work toward. The whole world is built around side grades, and there would be a very robust system to modify your weapons and your suits and vehicles to fit your personal playstyle. But the progression also isn't centered around unlocking things. It's geared more toward player-to-player interactions. As an example, if you're a player who uses a specific weapon or a specific loadout for a long, long time, maybe you have 1,000 successful missions using the same setup, you'll be allowed to restring that loadout or that weapon, and by restring I mean give it a name. So I can give this weapon a name, I can put it up on the marketplace where other players can inspect or buy it, or maybe I just stick it in a drop pod which is then sent into a random mission allowing it to be acquired by the first player who stumbles across it. Or if it's a weapon, maybe I go into combat with it, and when I die, it's able to be looted off my corpse. In this way, you're granting significance to the things a player uses without directly upgrading them for doing so. That creates value, creates recognition. So if I have a rifle that I really love and it's all kitted out and it's polished and it has a really funny weapon camo on it, and I complete 1,000 missions with it, I'm basically given the opportunity to turn it into a legendary item with that restring token. And I wouldn't permanently lose the weapon's design. Subsequent versions would just be printed as replicas and used per usual, no harm done. But that one weapon, that legendary item, is then shared among other players. So the guy who picks it up can then put it on display in their guild hall or in their bedroom, or maybe they can throw it up in the marketplace. You'd certainly have weapon collectors that would just gather these things up just so they can own them, especially if those items were owned by well-known players. So this sort of system is powerful in that it creates a goal for a player to shoot for with their current set of gear, something that takes a considerable amount of time to complete, much like Araxian medals in PlanetSide 2, but instead of just giving you a medal and some bragging rights and being done with it, you're actually sharing this achievement with the community in a way that they can literally benefit from, either by just giving them a piece of gear that they hadn't had access to before, or by allowing them to sell it for coin. So that's a small part of progression as I perceive it, and the last pillar is permanence. But this is also something that we've already touched on a number of times already. Having a family to share your day-to-day with, having a family to care for, that's permanence. Immortalizing your favorite weapon with a legendary status and then letting it loose into the world, that's permanence too. Buying out an NPC's entire production facility so that your guild can take its place, that's permanence in a really big way. And everything intertwines and connects, and that can create a game that is truly alive. And all of this may seem a little bit scattered, but it's not. The focus is to create a very cohesive experience by using each of these three pillars, and it's something that I feel can easily be reached within the current industry. But anyway, if this video has been interesting, helpful, or entertaining, please feel free to like, subscribe, tell your friends about the channel, and like I said, this is not something that I'll likely pursue the creation of. These are just ideas that I enjoy developing, discussing, and sharing. Thanks very much, folks. We're all signing off.